this will be, as soon as we get zeroed in here, this will be the beginning of the sixth Knowledge Seekers workshop. And we've got people, the knowledge seekers from the Spaceship Institute on the other end, and Mr. Kesh as well. He considers himself a knowledge seeker as well. So we'll get into it here. One of the main topics will be Fukushima, and we'll no doubt be talking about nanomaterials and some of the results from tests from the radiation and so on. And I also know that there'll be other questions. Leadmill has some questions about procedures for creating materials and so on. So we'll take it over to the Spaceship Institute here now.
Okay, well, hello. We are, how many? We are seven around the table, including Mr. Kesh, Jorge, myself, Yukako, who arrived from Japan during the week, beginning of the week, Marek, Ivan, and Marco.
And Arman
So-
still sleeping.
More or less.
We are still waiting for him.
He's here by spirit, but not by the body.
So, would you start with question, or what would you like to? The first topic would be.
Well, I do know that Mr. Kesh has hinted that he'd like to talk more about Fukushima. So maybe we could sort of warm up with that a little bit. Perhaps you could relay any new information that you may have, or some results, or just discuss some of the creation of nanomaterials. That's one way we could approach it. Otherwise, we can let Leadmill launch in with, he's got questions regarding procedures of making nanomaterials that might get things warmed up as well. Which
Well,
one?
let's start with Fukushima, and we'll go on with questions of Ludmil.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Yukako would like to say about.
Hello, Rick. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Hello. Hello.
Yes,
Okay,
morning.
but I need to show the. Could you open the document for me? Thank you.
I don't know if you lost them or something. Is it just me, or can you hear? Yeah. Probably the headset got disconnected or something.
Screening.
Whoops.
Yeah. Together.
Hello, you're back again.
Hello.
We lost your audio there for a minute.
Okay. So today, actually, the final result paper we're still working with. So the formal announcement of the whole result going to be the next workshop, hopefully. But Mr. Kesha would give us the way of analyzing, or his what he could find out from the result at this moment. And then before, I would like to share you more precise information about the background of those two experimented place. And then also I have several information from the local Fukushima people to share with all over the world as a reality, as the fact, what is happening in Fukushima right now. So I summarized some document I'm going to show you now. please. We initially, since the Mr. Kesha opened his video in February, we had a lot of requests. And then the one of the NPO actually invite us to conduct this experiment in a week after we opened this video. And also the other company, one of the supporters strongly recommend our technology to make experiment. This is the company called JLab. The JLab is the food quality assurance company. I'm going to tell you more detail in a minute. But the owner, Mr. Ito, has been really experimented, and they have been paying so much effort to fighting with this situation. And with the local farmers network, they have a huge local farmers network, and they almost have been became successful to achieve certain point to get rid of the total radioactive from the food production, in local food production, especially they dealing with rice production and some vegetable. So they have a confidence, and they quite open for the new technology. That's why they gave us a chance to experiment our technology in Fukushima. Okay, here is okay. Can I have a minute to set up? Sorry, I need 1 minute.
We will try to share the document through our desktop.
Yeah.
You want to talk before we go on the silent?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I press the
I'm a standby. Good morning. It's just till she sets up her dossier, which is loading on the net, that you can have access to what she's talking about. You can download it yourself. We would like, and I should say, I would like to thank Yukako sincerely for what she's done, going to Tokyo, going to Fukushima area, and trying to at least establish a line for what we could do in that area in helping the situation. The point at the moment with the Japanese government and TEPCO is that they are locked into a procedure which they have set for themselves with the commercial units like Mitsui and others. And what will be, we will explain once Yukako finishes her presentation and discussion. There is a huge difference between what we have offered as a foundation and what is available in general in the world of radiation and contamination. Are you ready? Or are you still loading? They are still almost loading. Yes, you ready? No, one is ready, one is not. One of the most important thing which has come to light in the negotiations with the Japanese authorities is that there is no interest in what do you call it, new technologies. There's absolute no interest, zero. We came to the conclusion with the people who are in charge. So we will see what the next step is. We've taken the steps through different, what do you call it, directions. The reason no interest is because they already committed themselves to multi-billion agreements internal with the Japanese corporations to manufacture things just to store the material for years to come. And the only thing they are doing at the moment is the separation of the material to store. So we will release a paper within the next few days that it puts our development totally in a different class in respect to the rest of the nuclear industry. Most of you have watched the video live when Yukako was in Japan, and we were having a discussion around the table till early hours of this morning. And we have come to certain understanding what figures we would like to see to go ahead and repeat, and some figures which, due to a small size of the samples, can have some discrepancies in it. So, but in any case, in every single application, we see reduction in the nuclear radioactive material activities within the solid or liquid. And this is a departure from the present nuclear industry. The present nuclear industry separates the radioactive material, contaminated materials, and put them in the tanks. And they're hoping 20, 30 years, in 100 years or so, they'll be less radioactive. For the first time, as you've seen on the videos, instantaneously, literally within seconds, as we introduce the material into the contaminated containers of water or soil, we see large percentage reduction in radiation leakage or contamination which is within the soil. Some figures goes as high as 30%, 35%, and in small dosages we've seen total zero, which this figure, according to what we discussed here last night, is has to be discussed and evaluated further. But even one of the most important things which Yukako did in the third day in Fukushima was the lab people provided us with deliberately saturated liquid metal that we tried to work with, and we reduced the radiation by a very large percentage in the first instant. This, to me, out of the whole experiment, this is absolutely crucial as a nuclear scientist, as a nuclear engineer, because this gives a real situation like a meltdown when you have metals were diluted within the water and within the soil of the place, which comes from the meltdown. And we have shown we have not separated radioactive material, but we have allowed, through the development of new materials, to convert materials which are radioactive to non-radioactive status of the same matter. This is fundamental. We've already written the paper, so it'll be published within the coming days. What this means, for the first time in the world of physics, we brought 30 years, let's say cesium-137 have a half-life of 30 years. Within matter of seconds, we have managed to make it non-radioactive, which means when you bring the same material into its Ganser state, it brings its gravitational and magnetical fields into balance, which is radiated by its neutrons, and that gives it a state of neutral, non-radioactive condition. What this means, we do not need to remove the material from the scene, but the material will stay in that condition for years and centuries to come. And so, in matter of few seconds, we have turned a radioactive environment to a non-radioactive without withdrawal or extraction, but allowing creating the environment that the radioactive materials become like GANs of themselves. And this is exactly how the body of the man handles cobalt and cesiums or gamma ray radiation in the body when it's entered, or when its body holds on to for application for division of the cells. So this test in Fukushima, which Yukako carried out, does not have application or implication only in the contamination in Fukushima. It has opened a huge door and insight in the world of the working of the biology and physics of the body, which in the paper we have explained. And at the same time, when you read the paper, when Yukako explained to you, we do not need to remove these neutrally balanced radioactive materials as GANs, because their energy and their condition can be used in the environment which they are, in the land or wherever, as a fertilizers to give energy to food or the seeds to grow. So this test has a huge implication. I think this has been one of the videos which we remembered for centuries to come, if the man understands what is sitting in it. We have control to change a radioactive environment to non-radioactive without extraction, by allowing the environment to adapt itself to. This is how human race has mutated. Now we understand the mutation and permutation of the mutation in the body of the man. So a lot of you was just going to Fukushima to see if we can help, but in fact, from the scientific point of view, every aspect of the human knowledge will be touched with this discovery, with what is being shown in a very simple test in Fukushima. I give the, are you ready, Yukoko? I give the microphone back to Yukoko. Bye.
Hello. Hello, it's Yukako again. Can you see the papers in your screen?
Yes.
Yes. Excuse me, what we can see is the title of the paper. Are you able to move through it? Okay.
Yep. Okay. So I would like to show you more precise information about some geographical information of the experimental place this time. So we had three experiments in total, and with the two different associations. And the first one, that the company called JLab, is located in the 60 kilometers away from the Fukushima Daiichi plant, which is in Susagawa City. Still within, it's not inside of the evacuation area, but still you can see the picture. It is very close to the Fukushima Daiichi plant. And then we have an experiment on 29th and the 31st of March. And the experiment 2 was in the NPO in Fukushima City. This is the public service for the student in the Fukushima City for the measuring radioactive in the body. They have a whole body counters and also some facility equipment for the food measurement, food radioactive measurement. And this is 65 kilometers away. It's a city. It's we can get express train, big station. This is actually the capital of the whole Fukushima region. Let me go more further detail about the JLab company, which is the first experimental place for us. The company is the business is the food quality assurance and the distribution service. So as a responsibility of the Fukushima product, Japanese consumers are strongly required very precise, very reliable measurement before they send the food product to the distribution system. So those company, JLab, is taking the responsibility of this biggest part of this activity. The company is established in 1993, has a long history, but they immediately start this decontamination measurement service after the earthquake. So now they kind of getting, to say, pioneer of the decontamination in the farmland in Fukushima. And they got a lot of collaboration with the Japanese scientists in the TEPCO and top academic institution also. So they have many experience to conduct this kind of experiment with new technology. And they got a measurement system with now scintillation spectrometer, which is also quite reliable and very professional laboratory facilities. The second one is the NPO in Fukushima, as I told you, it's a citizens radioactivity measuring station. It's a relatively new service. They started their official service from the last year, actually, but they have been working as a volunteer right after the earthquake happened. And the service station is located inside of the normal shopping mall, which is 10 minutes walking distance from the Fukushima city. So when I arrived to the Fukushima city, I'm fairly surprised that people are living like with very normal, without any fear, without wearing any mask or any protection. But actually they said to me that they can still measuring very high radioactive, depends on the weather conditions, but people are living in normal environment now. And the measuring station is, of course, it's not a free service. They charging a little money for the measurement, costs like €10 more or less for the each, but it's they open free for the children and the children on age under 15. And you can see the whole body counter in the bottom of the pages. They have a professional whole body counter. It is the same equipment as the Fukushima hospital has. And also they have a galvanium semiconductor detector and also scintillator spectrometer as the same as the JLab company. So both are our partners for this experiment this time. The results paper is still on working, so hopefully we can announce officially in next workshop. But we could see, as Mr. Kesha said, that elimination, not the only reduction of the radioactive, as a result, more or less 30% immediately after we added the CO2 liquid. But we found out some kind of the maximum capability of those two measurement systems. So in order to gain more reliable data, we would like to continue those kind of experiments in Fukushima again and again. And also we need to have a collaboration with highly developed laboratory in all over the world. So the result is showing in the proof of the CO2 effect or GAN's efficiency of the decontamination of the whole Fukushima, but we really need to have more proof and really need to have more opportunity to make more established proof in near future. Okay, and then from now on, I would like to share that some the fact of that decontamination activity in Japan, Fukushima now. As Mr. Kesha said, what they're doing is just a separation of the radioactive. It's not even a separation, or I can say that a diluting, to use in the water or some, very inefficient way to make a diluting very high concentrated radioactive and then measuring again, and then they said that it's safe enough to make a living in there. But even that this separation or dilution activity is not conducting in the right way. This is the proof in the public place in the Fukushima. This is the photograph. It's taken in last year in the front of the public library. This is the parking. you can see the children's. It is the school students are taking some sports activity in there, and it's quite accessible to everyone. Even the small children. But they could measure still very high radioactive 3.8 microsievert per hour. And they ask immediately to the local government to come decontamination because it's a public library. It's supposed to be done, finish all whole, decontamination activity. But in the end, they accept that actually they didn't do it in the parking place, and they promised to the NPO to do that immediate action by themselves. But actually what they did is, you can see the photograph in the right in the bottom. This is just it's another student as they working as a volunteer to get rid of those highly contaminated. This is the chestnuts on the ground and some dried leaf on the ground, and they working as a volunteer. And local government doesn't really support to get rid of those danger. The next photograph is in the residential area, decontamination activity in the residential area. This is the house, and the garden is a very little garden though. What they're doing is removing all the surface soil and just moving back to that some certain secure area, they said, but it's just they have a storage. It's still inside of the residential area, and which is not safe enough to be save those kind of contaminated natural materials. And you can see the right hand side photograph. It's very ridiculous to me, but people are eating actually lunch in next to this highly contaminated soil. So those people are working, but they don't have any specific training or knowledge of the decontamination, and they don't have any knowledge about the radioactive also. So they are working in that way to making a second or third, danger, hazard of the radioactive, by themselves. This is also the residential area. You can see that the 24 hours open small shop. In front of the shop, they're using the high water pressure cleaner to diluting or get rid of this. Just what they're doing is just like a normal cleaning. Is they just washing the ground, and then they're pushing the radioactive contaminated soil away to the edge of the parking area. And even during this activity, they spreading away very highly concentrated radioactive though. The students and all the non-students are, passing in front of the this, protected, people. I mean, the workers. So again, it became part of the daily life. That's why now they are extremely even more dangerous than the right after tsunami. I could say that they lost the sense of the fear of the radioactive, and they lost the consciousness about how it's harmful and dangerous in many ways. This is I really wanted to share as a reality of the decontamination activity in Japan. That's why I could convince that this technology, Mr. Kish's technology, is the only one of the most efficient, reliable technology we should, try more, because it's not only separation. This is the illumination, and it's more fundamental. We can get more fundamental, result with this technology. Okay, in the end, this is the actual health hazard in Fukushima. This time, I could meet the mother and the daughter who has a symptom of the thyroid cysts and thyroid cyst, sorry. And I seen the diagnosis and observation result of the doctor. It said they don't accept this is the cause of the internet exposure. What they say is that this is hypereosinophilic, might be cause of allergy or something. But actually the girl already had many of site in the thyroid in the right lobe, which is already reached to the 2 millimeters. And she's not only one. Actually, there is 55% of the children faced in the same situation now. And I could find out the updated data of the children's cancer. They tested 360,000 children out of 2 million population in Fukushima now, and 75 children already become cancer. They already has a clear diagnosis by the doctor as a thyroid cancer. And then we don't know how much in the A2 level, which is the same as this 8-year-old girl who has some irregularity in the thyroid system, but it's including, it's 2011 was 35%, but now we can see that 50 increasing drastically, like 50% in last year. So we have to take immediate action for that. And also the case 2 is the inflammation of the skin. One of the partner, that NPO staff, has the exactly same symptom as this. This is like a kind of atopic dermatitis. So it's the irritation on the skin. It's very itchy with the red welt-like symptom. But it's not only in the arm, it's actually spread in all over the body, and it's disappearing in few hours, but it appears again and again, and then the symptom is shown in many people, but it's not recognized as a consequence of the high contamination of the radioactive officially. But I personally do believe, and all the students, Fukushima students, know that this is the cause of the radioactive. So fortunately, Mr. Kesha Foundation has also some medical treatment. We have technology to help those people also. So first of all, we need to take a further experiment to make more established proof of this technology to be accepted officially, or to mass producing more guns, in our laboratory also. And then secondly, we would like to start this kind of medical treatment action for the Fukushima people. So we are going to start to have to set up the strategy and more further discussion in a short time. Thank you. That's all for today. Any question or any? Any questions?
Yes, Yukako. Sorry, it's Vince here. Just
Yeah.
wondering what JRAP is. Are they extremely interested in the technology themselves as well?
Yes, they are interested in, but at, at this moment, they have some. They collaborate with several different laboratory in Japan also, but they showing that similar result like a reduction. But this is the reduction. This is not elimination though, but some similar amount of reduction as a result of the experiment. So we have to make more proof like this is not only reduction, this is the elimination, and it's continuously develop, you know, those reduction elimination activity by itself by this CO2 gun, which is going to be very breakthrough technology for them, and they really interested in to continue the experiment, but we need to have more higher contaminated water sample without any mixture of metals in the second step, which is a bit difficult to access for us and for JLab even at this moment. So we need the collaboration with the other laboratory in Japan.
Right, that's the other laboratory in the Fukushima city. Is that right?
Yeah, this is ideal. Otherwise, they have to take the risk to move this such a highly contaminated water from Fukushima to the other. They cannot use in the FedEx or any shipping system. So it's a very risky to do in outside of Fukushima. So we would like to find out the partner within the Fukushima to working with us in the next step. Okay. Additionally, I left leftover of CO2 guns in the laboratory in Kyoto, actually. So it's a west side of Japan, but they have a highly equipped laboratory of the nanomaterials making. So hopefully they do some further experiment with this leftover CO2 guns immediately. And then I'm waiting for the results also.
So
Actually, sorry.
Right. So there's a group that's creating the nanomaterials as we speak. Is that right?
Not our nanomaterial, but it's a independent laboratory, and they making the nanomaterial in the very old-fashioned way, I can say, in spending a large budget to make it at this moment, but they have a knowledge of how to dealing with nanomaterials, and they have access to this highly contaminated sample. So hopefully, and I already sent the papers of the CO2 and the copper guns officially published from this by Kesho Foundation. So hopefully they show the interest and then taking the examination in short time.
Thank you, Yukako.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you very much. That was a nice presentation with the pictures and so on that we were able to see. So thanks.
Thank you very much for your support also. And thank you. I would like to say thank you to the all Fukushima people, especially JLab and this NPO people, to believe us, to give us a big opportunity. I'm really appreciating, and this is the words from all of us, of course, including Mr. Kesha. Thank you very much. And I hope to share with you the results in next week. Thank you. Can I pass my microphone to someone? Yeah. No? Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
I would suggest, if it's possible, to send that presentation when it's ready to everyone.
It will be done.
Okay, thanks, John.
Okay, Ludmil, you had a question. We could maybe shift to your questions.
Yes, I do, but I can start as soon as we are done with Fukushima, if that's all.
Well, if there are no more questions about Fukushima, we can go on.
Okay, so I can start with my questions. It's going to be a sort of long conversation. You can blame my social education, but I studied like 50 years ago.
Make it short and go on.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you questions. Don't accept it as testing or something else. I just want to completely understand what we are trying to do. And I'm going to start with creating the nanomaterials. So there is even a post in the Keshe Foundation forum, and half of the steps are wrong. So I would like to clear this completely before we can go further down to create the GAN state and stuff like that.
Okay.
So my first question is, starting from the beginning, you add KOH or NaOH into a plastic container.
Yes, that's it.
Mr. Keshe once says he is covering the KOH with plastic mesh. Is that still standing or not?
Yes, well, there are two steps. The first step is, in fact, to have mostly you will put caustic soda and eventually a little bit of potash or whatever you have containing potassium. You could add eventually pieces of aluminium also, and yes, and yes, okay. So you have a stuff which is put in the plastic container, and the mesh is in fact to separate the material you want to nanocoat from being clogged with pieces of sodium hydroxide or potassium, whatever you have there. It's the mesh, plastic mesh, is just to have a separation between the material that you want to coat and the caustic soda and whatever you have used for the condition to be created. It's just to lift it a little bit. It's just to create a kind of gap between the bottom of for the sediments to be in the plastic container, separated from the material you want to coat.
Okay, that answers to one question. The other question is, when do you use KOH? When do you use NaOH? I have access to ammonium OH, magnesium OH, lithium OH. So is it any rule of the thumb regarding the materials and the different OHs, or how that works?
You have different conditions being built up, but mainly KOH brings potassium, which contains a certain amount of potassium 40, and potassium 40 is a beta releaser, and that condition helps the buildup of the nanomaterial on the surface of the wires or whatever you use to be coated. So mainly what is used here is sodium hydroxide, and a little bit of potassium is added to help in the development of the nanomaterial. Yes, and this depends on the salt. Well, what we are doing all depends on the salt we are creating, and hope it still goes on.
Yeah, Dave is trying to get in.
Okay. So we have it's calling the group. Okay, so what's important to see is that the salt, the sodium hydroxide containing sodium is the type of salt that we are looking to have, and that will be used further afterwards when we make the cells. We still use sodium salt, which is the sea salt is mainly sodium chloride, and you are in the same kind of material because it's also sodium. So that's why it's mainly sodium hydroxide that is used, but potassium hydroxide is added for help in the nano coating of the material.
I see some people add Coca-Cola next. Is that one of the conditions?
The Coca-Cola next is to release some hydrogen monoatomic, and it's also to help the production of the nanomaterial being on the surface of the material you want to coat.
So if we want, we can add them and no harm them, right? Well, if we have them, we can add them there.
What you achieve when you add different materials to your what do you call it, the original coating, is that in the future, when we have more detailed breakdown of the layers, is that all your materials, which you, let's say if you use copper wire, the way it's done here most of the time, what you get is the ganses of copper, layer by layer, overlaying each other. As one layer is produced, the other layer pushes the bottom skin up and allows the production, or through the gaps you allow the copper oxide. In introducing the plastic from Coca-Cola bottle or aluminum, you create the same nano layer of hydrogen in between the gaps. So when you put composite material in your caustic, somewhere in your layers, those materials become part of, it becomes composite nano layer. And in some cases when you do this, you'll find a multicolor mixture when you produce your GANs. In case of introducing plastic from the Coca-Cola bottle, it's to produce not a homogeneous but a composite layers. So these composite layers, you only see them if you produce enough of them when you convert your nano layers into a GANs state. So if you have put bits of plastic in your caustic, you might have let's say 10,000 layers of copper, 2-3 layers of hydrogen nano, and then if you put aluminium, you get maybe 10 layers of aluminium, and then you get copper. But because you don't have the facility to measure, you see mainly the copper GaNs state when you convert it. But in fact, this is part of the process that we use for composite GaNs materials. This is the next step to understand, but at the moment, as far as you're concerned, you just make copper oxide or copper nano layers, which leads to copper oxide on the top layers when it's converted. So you can add any material you like, and you make a sandwich. And if you do enough of it, enough layering of it, where you allow the porosity of the nano layer to be held, you will find out you can make composite nano layers. We've done it here, and you will see the change. They don't mix. This is the reason we put things in, but that was to be discussed later on. It's something we are aware of. But if you put too much plastic in from the bottle, and you produce a nano hydrogen layer in your sandwich, then you'll find out your penetration, the system stops much faster, because the size of the nano hydrogen gap is, let's say, it is 10 to minus 9, and then you have a copper on the top and a copper underneath, so the filtration stops. This is a technology we developed. It's been tested especially for dialysis system. So at the moment you try to understand about the layers, and then we speak about the composite layers in the next few months when everybody understands what's going on. I'll pass on to John.
So isn't making just stupid suggestion some sense if we want to produce these layers, let's say to leave the material for 12 hours, after that add, let's say, Coca-Cola bottle cups and have them for another 12 hours. In that way we can have the layers separated and in order, I guess. Or I'm wrong?
Well, that's the way, because when you want to nanocoat, the material in which your material, the way the nanocoating is done depends on the environment. So if you change the environment, the nanocoating will modify in consequence. So the size of the container, the position of the container near a wall, or well, the container itself is plastic. It's another kind of it's a kind of plastic because it has to be sufficiently inert in some ways, but cola next is in fact transformed because it's another kind of plastic. So you have to choose your plastics in such a way that the container won't react too much. So yes, the change of material and condition will change the coating made.
Okay, going back to the KOH and NaOH, I think finally we got down to 5 grams per liter or less than that. Is it any measurement we can use roughly, or?
Well, we have no measurement, but in fact, in French we say au pifomètre. In fact, it's we just put a layer, thin layer, in the bottom of the container, the plastic container, just to spread out the NaOH and put a little bit of KOH, I would say it doesn't go over the 10% of KOH for the quantity of NaOH. It's just a little, and that's why we have layering of the nanomaterial that will give us a spectrum of fields in the nanomaterial.
Okay. So after that we add boiling water. Boiling water gets the temperature to some extent of the entire container. If we put it in a water bath, let's say for example, we can keep that temperature for unlimited time. Does that make any sense or not?
No, it's not necessary. What is important is the initial condition, and that's why, in fact, if you put some boiling water, by adding that to the caustic, you just increase the temperature at that moment, because when the caustic will dissolve in water, it will increase. That's why when you pour the water, even if the boiling has just stopped, you see the water boiling again when you pour it. That's because the increase of temperature produced by the dissolving of the caustic soda or the potash will allow a new boiling of the water. It's a local increase in temperature made by the mixing of the material. That's why you don't use caustic soda in the liquid form. You'd use it as a crystalline form.
Okay, but my idea is, do we need continuous temperature for the entire process?
No,
because
it's
at
just
the beginning we can use the existing temperature, and after that we can put it in a water bath, let's say, for example.
No, it's not
keep
necessary.
the temperature up. It's not a problem.
No, what's important is to close the lid and to keep the environment, and that environment has to be left, and it will continue for a certain amount of time. But it's the initial temperature and increase of temperature when you pour the water on your caustic soda that give the condition, and the condition has to be maintained by the cap that you'll put on your plastic container.
Okay.
It's in some ways I've tried to use my extraction of caustic material produced by the ashes, and have reached with a stainless steel coating completely black, but this has to be tested further to see if it's really the nanomaterial we need, but it becomes a black, very dark black powder on the surface. Yes.
There is a addition a little bit, because we explained this yesterday in the lab. Whatever nanomaterial you make, it will be black. Doesn't matter what you make. Use caustic, use different kind of salt, any OH combination you use. The end product, if you made a very, very good material, doesn't matter if it's copper, whatever, and you made good enough thick layers, you should get a black color. On gold, we have never seen black, but we produce that. In silver, sometimes we have seen spots of black, but not full black. But if you have a real perfect nanomaterial, doesn't matter what you make, it should be black in color. Reason being is that nano layers, they are made of solid cavity, solid cavity. It's positive, what do you call it, p-n junction. It is capacitor, it's solid container to hold the capacitor, the capacitance in the middle. So what in fact it is, the gap, the center of the gap, and the reason you get a gap and you get the material on either side is that the matter in the GaNs state, or in the nano state I should say first, is gravitational magnetic field layer of itself. The gap between the two, or what you call p-n junction, between the two matter, is where the two atoms of, let's say, carbon find their distance. It's a separation between two similar gravitational magnetic fields of, let's say, carbon, that creates the gap. This is what we call the maggrav of one atom finds balance in its position in respect to maggrav of another atom of carbon. So to find the position between this, like the Earth and the Sun, where they find a gap, the balance, they find a gap. But because the both atoms are of the same gravitational magnetic field, you see homogeneous gaps and matter, gaps and matter. So you have to understand the structure. So in GaNs, in a nano layers, why you find equal gaps and equal material is because the gravitational magnetic field of the similar element is just about the same. And when you put two plasma next to each other, they don't get stuck to each other in the opposite way, but they find a gap that they can accommodate each other. So you create that gap. That's why nanomaterials are p-n junction look. Now, the other thing you have to realize is that, okay, now the next layer up, you have another atom of carbon. Now you have another vertical p-n junction, another nanolayer composition in respect to the layer up. So when you have gaps and magnetic field, gravitational field separation, layer on layer, not only, let's say, the 10th layer interacts with the 11th layer, but the 10th layer interacts, is filled with the 20th layer on the copper wire. The strength between the first, or the 10th and the 20th is different than the one between 10th and the 11th. So what you in fact produce on nano layers is a spectrum of gravitational magnetic fields. And as you know, why a material is dark, black? Because of the absorption of all the lights, all the frequencies, all the spectrum of the magnetic fields. So if you have created a perfect thick nano layer, and you understand the concept of the physics and interaction of the gravitational magnetic field which you produce between each layer, you absorb through a gravitational field of layers interaction and a spectrum of the light. So your nano layers, doesn't matter what you produce, if it's good enough, has to be black. The blackness shows the perfection of the nano layers and the layers which are on gravitational magnetic fields. This is very much, if it's hard to understand, it's like the layers on the ring of Saturn's. Ring of Saturn's blackness is in layers in so many ways. It's a balanced magnetic fields which absorbs, we see it. But you see the same thing in the structure of the plasma, in the solar systems, in the star. Now, what happens, a lot of you, I know you did the test last Saturday, for example, in Canada, I think. When you take Vince, I think he's done that, yeah. So, because I thought it was done in Belgium. So what happens is that When you let your nanomaterial dry to stabilize its condition, because if you keep it in liquid, they still can slip, and you'll find out, oh, I had a coating and not suddenly disappeared, because you did not create a stabilized condition that all the fields link to each other. This is why we let you hang your wires or films or whatever for 24 hours, for the establishment of the gravitational magnetic field balance between each layer. There's no other reason for it. This is why we tell you the minute you take it out, put a voltmeter on it. That establishes a faster connection between layers, stabilizing each line is layered to each other. Now what do? You take this film or the copper wire which you have coated, and you put it back in the salt solution. And then you see that you get green materials, blue materials, orange materials, white materials, depends whatever it is, getting to the bottom. And if you connect enough of these in the containers, the way you see in the knowledge seekers are doing in the lab, you'll collect a lot of copper oxide. But if you stay there long enough, after a week or two or whatever, you find out you're still collecting copper oxide, but your dark black material has disappeared. What's the reason? But you have no black material at the bottom of the pot. So what happens now, layer by layer, which was a nano layer on the top, because you created the condition in the salt and back in the same environment as you created it, the top layer finds a gravitational magnetic field within the H2O of the water, a condition to release its field and become separated from the created nano layer. So what you get now, a flat condition to a spherical condition. Now, in the way of trying to become the spherical shape of itself, the material, because it has found balance in nano condition, because of the gap and spaces it created with the different layers on different length, now you have a balanced sphere. And this balanced sphere is still copper. But what has happened, it rotates to become a ball of the copper. It becomes a sphere of the copper atom in its own entirety of the atomic structure. Now you get color of copper plus the oxygen which was part of the bond, which is in the water, or the hydrogen, and you get copper oxide. So you start creating copper oxide, you lose your top layer, you find out the next layer goes the same way, till you get to a point that the gravitational magnetic field of the copper itself can hold on to a very few nano layers above it. And this is the point you'll find out very fine. I've shown this to the knowledge seekers, talky kind of copper oxide. And the gap between it allows the separation and the, conversion of the atoms into nano, and from nano into mixing with the water to a copper oxide. So, in fact, what you do in the whole process, you put your material in the, caustic. You heat it up. In heating up, you allow the loosening of the top layer. And these top layers, because you keep the environment the same, build up very fast. So now you're changing a molecular structure into atomic structure. This is the reason you do the caustic. Then you let it hang and you allow it to stabilize. Then you can leave the wire for centuries, or you can use the wire tomorrow morning. When you put it back in the environment of where it came from, which was the sodium, that's why you put it back in the salt, which has got the sodium. You allow the same environment which you have created for the separation back into atomic structure. So you go from flatliner to a atomic spherical balance, which is the GANs. You got to understand the process. And this is what a lot of people never understood. Can we do this? Can we do that? You can do anything you like. This is how your body is made. You have a red tissue, you have the skin on it. Where do you think the skin came from? Somebody doesn't go and put the skin on the muscle. Because of the gravitational magnetic field of what the fiber amino acid is, so the body at that point uses a different salt combination to make the cover of the muscle. Then it uses it because of its combination, and the gap does not allow blood to go through, but it allows the lymph to slip inside. So you got to understand what you do, how you do it, and like just not just bunch of monkeys mix things and then say it did that, it didn't do that. Why do you do it? This is not as His Eminence Ayatollah Khamenei said in one of his speeches, should not become a photocopying office. He said Iran should not become a photocopying book for other nations' scientists, but other nations have to become photocopying for what the Iranians produce. This mentality has to go across all of us. It's not just a photocopying machine that, oh, they did this, so we did. Understand what you're doing. Understand the reason layers are created. Understand what is the consequences of it. Understand what you want at the end of it. How much carbon you want, how much would hydrogen attach itself to copper, in what combination would attach to a nanolayer that it becomes a GaN later on. What do you need the GaNs of the hydrogen in which level? Observe the first layers when you dig, when you clean up the bottom of the pot, and then later on. The coarse, it's not very fine. Because you don't have a copper oxide on its own, you have other attachments or molecules. So is this question of why you do this, why you do that, it means you have never understood, you just want to be a photocopying machine. That's why the Keshe Foundation and knowledge seekers are not here to become your photocopying machine. This has to stop. Understand. You don't understand. None of you ask what is the structure of it, why and how. This has to change. Because if you understood how one atom, one atomic layer, in respect to another atomic layer stands, if you look at the next layer, the carbon should be somewhere in the middle between the other 2 or 3 carbons underneath, not straight away on the top. In the next few days, when we're just getting ready, you will see, I explained yesterday to the knowledge seekers in the lab, we are setting up the space reactors in the star configuration. You see the same repeat, because we understood the whole concept. You'll find the mother reactor. If you look at the design of the reactor in the design of the spaceship which we released, you just looked at it, oh, this is what's going on. Look at the position of the 3 reactors at the bottom. Look at the reactor number 1, the mother reactor in the center. It's set in the same position combination as nanolayers, but in 2 layers. The mother sits up, same distance gap between the 320 degrees away and the same distance down. So because we do this, it allows us to create gravitational magnetic fields in any direction as we desire. We have repeated the technology of a nanolayer into a GaNs state as a nanolayer in the space technology for the lift. Understand the totality of it. Now look at the structure of your amino acid. Oxygen sits on top. Oxygen star, I keep on telling in my talks before. Then the nitrogen, hydrogen, and carbon play very similar position as the star formation. This double bond, single bond is all a load of rubbish because they never understood. It's magnetic gravitational positioning. Even I hope the knowledge seekers will show you the system which are built especially to produce protein. I showed them yesterday. You see 2 gaps which are oxidized, 1 gap clear, 1 gap going. And you find the clear gap is the oxygen in the center, 2, 1, 1. And then because I set up to create the soul, you find 1 and then you find a oxidization. This is exactly how the brain is. You have the emotional, you have the gap, you have the physical, you have the gap, and you have what you call the soul. And nobody understands the connection. Just don't become monkeys. Try to understand. And we try to explain more and more. How do we accomplish? Does it matter? I want to do. What do you want? Do you want I made one system and I knew I'm going to make amino acid. And you see it. Doesn't matter if it's oxidized by water or it's oxidized by steel or whatever, you still get the same combination. Because the target was not only to produce a very, very perfect protein, but it was set, the system which I made, was set to produce very, very little voltage and current. I always say you don't see megawatt, kilowatts in the body of the man, but it survives and it works because it works on nano, micron voltage and amperage. And in my system, I've done it, and in their system, the knowledge seekers have done, they've done the same. So don't come back and say you add caustic. It means you have understood nothing but you're doing it. Just a bunch of, what you call it, monkey see, monkey do. Understand the totality. The reason it's done, why you're doing it, why do we put in the salt. The next step, we use the same nanomaterial which comes out of the pockets to produce the brain structure which is on the table now. Because your body, your brain is made of Ganser state of matter. Now we're producing the first zero, without any wire communication, exactly like a brain, and it sits here on the table. So please just don't go, why you do this, can you do that? Understand what you're doing, and then understand the concept, the principle. Then once you understand, you can do whatever you like. I'll give the phone back to John.
That's what I'm at least trying to do, to understand it. Another question, you said, let's say soldering the wires is big no-no. Is that because it's contaminating the OH or some other reasons behind?
You cannot solder because.
It means he hasn't understood what I just said.
It means you haven't understood a single thing I said. When you have the reason you cannot solder or weld nanomaterials when they are coated is because when a material is in its balance condition, which is in its nano layer, especially on the top layer, it does not accept anything. It's in balance. A material accepts something when its gravitational differential is within itself is different. You create a balanced gravitational magnetic field within the atom of the copper. So it does not need to repel and it does not need to absorb, and it stays balanced. The only way you can add something to it is by force to tighten it up to it, which is twisting it, something on top of it. So that is why nano layers behave like diamonds. They behave like Teflon. Nothing can stick on them because they have a gravitational magnetic field balance. When you are in balance, you don't accept and you don't reject. So in adding or soldering or something, you have to create an environment that you can get into, at least to hang on to something. Huh? When you have soap on your hand, you cannot climb up a rope. Yeah. So because there is no room for it to be done, it's the same thing. The reason
Mr. Cash?
nanomaterials can yes.
Sorry. I think, I'm not sure, but I think Lidmill was trying to ask if solder, if we put solder inside a caustic solution, obviously we're going to be adding
No, it
different
doesn't
materials.
do. No, it doesn't make any difference because you can put gold in there. The layers are in the nano layers, which means they're in balance. They're in magnetic gravitational field balance. And in so many ways, if you look, this was done by the people in the Diamond Bourse in Antwerp for me years ago. If you look at the very, very outer layer of the, what do you call it, of the nano material, you don't see a flat. You see very much like a half bulged up, which means you sit on top of a mountain. There are no, and it's just because of the atmospheric gravitational field outside. There's a slight bulge, but it's very much flat. So you don't have that. You don't have anywhere to grip on, and you cannot add some. You can add as many materials you like. I use even the solder. You have a diamond of the solder with a matter of solder. Whatever is the composition.
Could you not melt that solder away?
No. We tried everything. You tried. We tried because you have to understand the physical structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dogs with dogs, you can't get a dog and a bird to mate, can you? It's the same thing. They're two different things, and they don't match.
I wouldn't want to try.
No, you never know. In the future, we will.
So any other material?
We might try. It'll be a nice flying dog.
So any other material beside, let's say, if we deal with copper, any other material besides copper
any material
is gonna demolish the connection of the magnetic.
There is no polish. You still haven't understood it, Ludmila. There is no polish. It's a magnetic gravitational field balance.
No, demolish. I mean, demolish is gonna destroy the magnetic gravitational connection.
No. If you don't have a layer, you can't destroy a nano layer. Yesterday, we received a core for Marco. It's the first silver-coated system we are going to try. Should be ready hopefully next couple of days. We silver-coated, particularly nano-coated silver about 3 years ago. And it can be done, but it's a very, very thin layer, extremely thin layer. That's because of the atomic structure of the silver itself. You don't see it. We have not seen it going black. We shown the picture of it 4 or 5 years ago on the Keshe Technology website. The same thing happens with gold. You can touch the first few layers, and then due to the gravitational magnetic field of it, it blocks the rest to be done. Mainly to do, I think, with the environment, which is done. If you do it in a total gold environment, might be different. We never had access to test it. So if you put a voltmeter on it, you will see your, what do you call it, the ohmmeter will show insulation total. Which shows there's a nano layer, because that's a characteristic of nano layers. The current flows along, not across. You see your material becoming, what do you call it, resistant, not a conductor, but an insulator. But that insulation layer is very, very thin, extremely thin. So you have to watch when you handle it. And at the same time, you learn by experience. And you mix materials. You can leave your material for 12 hours and put something else in 12 hours on it, but understand how gravitational magnetic field of the layers interact and what you can do next. There are ways to do things. We've done things before, and it's very interesting when you do composite matter, nano layer, GANs. And you will see that very soon. That's when we understand the nano layer production. Then we do the composite materials. It's a fantastic business. The people who are worried about the computer world, they'll be shaking when they know how they can do it and it's worth nothing to do. Because each gap within the nano layer is a magnetic field gap and it has a spectrum. You can put all the information of the present computers in one of those gaps if you understand what to do. But in time we open the window. At the moment you got to understand what nanomaterials are and how you can work with it. Because don't forget, the gap in between the layers, as much as is separation, is the center itself of energy of gravitational magnetic field too. Because to keep that separation, the matters part, which is the atoms of, let's say, carbon, have to continuously release their fields to keep their presence, balanced presence. And where do these fields go when you have a gap? So these gaps are the center of energy and information if you know how to play with it. But in time we explain. John?
Okay, so
the question.
yeah, there are lots of questions, and more coming up, by the way.
Is there somebody else wanting to ask a question also?
Yeah, actually, I just had a quick question. When we were talking before, I had told you that I was using a salt solution, and I made that salt solution 50%, and I still see that I'm, for what I can see, I'm gathering materials, which could be copper oxide, and so does. On my next experiment, I'm going to try with 10 times less the concentration, so 5% solution, and see the difference. I think of it as like tuning the system to where it would pick it up. Is that right?
Look at the texture of what you.
Material and look at the current flow. The voltage and current flow between your cups if you're using different cups.
Sorry, yeah, I can't hear you.
Look, when you change the composition or when you change the dilution percentage, yeah, look at the, there are a few things to look at. Look at the what do you call it? The structure of the GANs. If you produce enough of it, keep it in the box and look at how the magnetic gravitational field balance comes in. And then try to measure the voltage and the current according to the dilution. And then while you're doing that, keep an eye, don't look at the bottom, see what you've collected. Look on the top, see what structure the fat you're producing is looks like, feels like, behaves like. Because if you have managed to do a copper oxide, if you manage to make a CO2, due to the situation which you create inside at a very, very low current flow of plasma, you have to understand the energy you release in these sets is not electron plasma, is that magnetic field between the atoms which you're releasing, which is MAGRAF. So that MAGRAF can lead to creation, especially in a water condition, and especially try to add some nitrogen, fertilizer to your thing. You see if the speed production of the nitrogen goes high enough to create and give you a different kind of fat on the top. Look at the layer on the top. We are sending these layers for examination this week for energy combination.
Mr. Keshe, you're talking about the grease-looking thing on top.
Yeah, that is fat. That's a natural fat. If you put a finger on it, don't do it till we give you full detail, and put it on your mouth. First of all, you feel like a very massive burn for a few hours because you receive too much energy. It's like you're getting hit by, let's say, by a torch. But because it's plasmatic, it gets absorbed by your body, and you'll find out you lose your appetite for a bit. The reason you lose your appetite is not the side effect, it is because you receive direct plasmatic GANS state energy the way your body is made of. The tinkling and the feeling is just that the body is trying to absorb it. It's the way your food goes through your lymph system. So if you, that greasy thing is what I call the cow machine. This is the source of life. If you make different composition of salts, as we've done in the lab, and I showed it to the knowledge seekers yesterday, you get a fat one, which is the less salt you add, you go towards the sweet water, goes towards the protein, which is to do with the wheat and vegetables. The more salt you add, you look at the structure. If you set it up the right way, you get a thicker fat on the top. This is the animal fat. So if you have 3 or 4 different things on your table of combination of the salt, you can mix it together too. Then you eat and you can consume all the energy you need in the spectrum of the fat in all protein, like a bread, a meat and vegetable protein. And you just need to put your finger on it and you just taste it. And that gives you enough energy for just about 2 or 3 days every time you touch it on your mouth. Because it's made of the structure of your own body in a GANS state, your body absorbs it straight away. If you have by mistake while you're working with your water touched it and put it around your mouth, you know exactly what I'm talking. Yukoko had it, I had it. It feels very much like a burn.
Careful.
Pardon?
I've been very careful.
Yes, but in a way, these are the feeding systems of the future. But we have to understand how much energy you receive, because that's one of the things we ask the laboratories to do, to tell us how much the energy content of these materials. So you got to understand the process. What you have in front of you, we started with a nano layer. You will understand more and more what it means. These systems, if you would have come out from the beginning, says this is the fat, this is your food, the what do you call it, agriculture people would have gone up the creep. But now you see it, you just said it. You see that grease, and as you said, you change the composition. This is why we find animals like red blood or whatever as being on the land. And with the different protein, you see the flesh of this fish in the water, which has got a different dilution. And again, you see wheat. If this is a good example in Fukushima. The water contamination, which has come from the sea, has contaminated the land with the salt, and nothing can be grown, because exactly what you said, the salt combination has changed. Protein for wheat and rice is a weaker mixture. If you could wash the land with the rain and take its salt content out, the land become in a condition, environmental condition, that they can produce wheat again. This is what these GANS materials would allow the land to do. The salt contamination, if they know what to do, they can use it to produce GANS of the matter, which will allow in its shielding wheat to be grown in the middle of the sea. Cannot do. Because they haven't understood the concept, they haven't understood the principle. So you dilute 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. Observe the fat which you produce on the top. And if you can get them analyzed, you see in the weakest, the lightest, you have the protein, the fat layer, the grease of what protein is in the wheat. And in the higher composition, you see the fat protein of the man, or the animals, or flesh. This is what we try to explain. This is what's coming out in the paper I've written. It's going to be published with, hopefully when Marco and Yukako will finish it the next few days. I have explained that in the paper. In fact, in Africa, a child should not go hungry anymore with what is on the table. You touch, you take that grease, and it's so rich, it's so full of balanced energy the way your body is made. You receive the energy, you live a normal life. This is how life will be fed in the space. We won't give you apples and oranges. We won't give you meat. Partial part of digestion will be supplied in this way. This is what I kept on telling you, nobody understood. We changed what color would you like the CO2 to be, because in your head you understand it that way. But in fact, the energy is in a GANS state, is in the exact copy of your own body, and absorption is very easy. You can feed, I call them milking cows. These are protein cows, which you doesn't need a cow to do, because now we understand the process of the creation. This is what I said. Next week we announce something which is going to shock a lot of people, and the Vatican will run for it and the rest behind it. The whole process is the man dependence on the cycle of this planet through this system is completed. So you can have your energy, if you can produce enough of it, and now, as you say, you see that layer of grease on top. That is a pure, is part of your structure of your own body. The food is there, the energy is there, and the warmth you can use if you know what to do with it. So the circle is getting completed, but the beauty of it is people like you are testing and showing and saying, this is what I see. But now we talk what do you call it, a baby, then baby language, and a doctor in the doctor language about the same thing. Bird and the bees. So now you start doing it, and hundreds of thousands of people are doing it. Now you have to understand what you're doing and what you're producing. This is the ultimate feed machine. The only thing is you need what protein you need, what material you need for it, is how you dilute it. This is how life created. Nobody came and brought a seed of rice and put it there and says that's protein. Because of his salt contamination in wherever it started, and the dilution of it, it became wheat. If you put it enough over a long period, the next, let's say 3 or 4 months, if you know what you do, you can create rice protein which has the same fat content condition in the salt level as a cow protein. Now you understand it. This throws the whole genetic into the commotion of not being back to zero again. You try, you change the dilution, but watch what current flow of plasma you get. How
Okay, so
much your light
can I speak
enlightens.
about current?
Yes,
So,
there's a current flow of plasma, not the current as electron current, huh?
Right, so that also says that the more cells that you have, that the current will be distributed in a lower amount to each individual cell. Is that
Yes, but
accurate?
you see, because let me explain something, Vince. The knowledge seekers realized that in the second test here, when they start adding more cells into the boxes, the energy went down, and they was puzzled. Yeah, how can this be? Because logically, in the matter level, when you add more cells, you get more current and the voltage. Yeah, but here it doesn't happen. Because the plasma have to find a balance.
So the current or the voltage going down would would also mean the voltage
current,
will go down for each individual cell.
Yes, the current in this system is a plasmatic current flow, which means gravitational magnetic. When there is no balance, it goes the other way till it gets fed. You take from your environment what you need. I think somebody
and the feeding
will post.
is all depending on the layers that you create.
Pardon?
The feeding, I would say, would be the layers that you create on your coated wires. Or
in a way, yes, but what's going to happen if you run your systems long enough and you're patient enough? you will find that very soon in times to come that there are no materials left in your buckets to change, to convert. Because what you've done, you converted all the copper matter into a copper nano, and from copper nano into copper GaNs, or CO2 GaNs, or CuO GaNs, or CO2 GaNs, and you collect it from the bottom. Where do you think the material from the bottom comes from? It's the copper which you put in there, and how much copper you had in your wire. So very soon you become magicians, the thing disappears. And if you know how to convert that material which you collected in the way we are doing it, I think you saw the picture last time, and you have time enough to allow again nano layer in a GaNs state to be established, then you come to the essence of creation, the brain of the man, and the logic of non-zero communication time. Because they create now in the ball the same structure as you had it in a nano state, but in layers in GaNs state. And they have to accommodate each other. The knowledge seekers were surprised. We were taking water from the top and the more water was coming up. What was happening? Because the fields will interact and they squeeze their own way to find sponging and communication line. And then when they do that, the orientation they find, you got to see which one connects to where, and then you create the computers which are instantaneous. You find the brain of the man. And this is what we're trying to produce. You have to understand why the brain is in that liquid environment. Look at the cut when you see it. The top edges where the liquid is a slightly different texture than what is inside. Because from that layer, as the material is produced, it sinks in. One is in the outside of the brain near the skull. In due time, as it sinks, it becomes the emotion because it's had every physical interaction. Your brain cell in your stem cell, where your emotional part is just born out of it, it sinks into it. And I put it on the ball here. Because by the time it gets to the position to become your emotional part, knows all the working of the effects of the physical part. But at the same time, it knows the way it has come and it has a line of communication to that part. That's how when you feel pain from your arm, you move your arm. Because the cell which has become part of your emotional part reaction has come through that passage down and is sank to the center. This is what the world of medicine has never understood. This is why you have different folds in your brain on the outer wall, but inside there is no fold. Because they have to reduce, creating exact condition as the brain of the man here on the table with the light on it. They will see it. It's not that a cell comes in your main brain and it connects to somewhere. The cell which comes in your main brain, and that's why you wish you die, you want your amputation of your arm because it's somewhere but you can't do it yourself, because that cell has come from that and it's sunk into the center. Look at the shape of your brain. It's another nano GaNs layer. You have to understand the process we are coming to. We're showing the world of creation from the beginning. John?
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
20 minutes.
20 minutes left.
John, Geert here from Belgium.
Yes, hello there.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question about the course, the half course to nanocode. We understood that it was very important to position the half course into the caustic. But probably I overseen some things and I put them in the caustic or in the container with both big flanks down sides. Normally it should be the bottom with the big flank upwards. The question is, would it be possible to redo the process? Can I do the process again with already coated spheres, or would it damage the cores?
No, you can just repeat stainless copper coated.
Yes.
It's
No, this
no.
makes it better.
Yes.
You can do it again, and because
Okay.
the copper you have coated first will has a certain thickness, so by making the well, okay.
Good.
Yes.
Can you explain to me which way you put it, upside down, or which?
Okay,
how did you place it?
I have two big flanks and two small flanks.
Yeah.
And I put it both halves with the big flank downwards.
So you coated the back or inside?
What
The
do you mean?
outside or the inside?
The inside.
Inside. What you can do, if you see the coating is not, or you think is not good enough in the center or in the outer edge,
it looks
you can.
very good. It looks very good.
It looks
but,
very good. Why do you want to coat it again then?
We discussed this with Ad and Ludmil also. Maybe it's important that the half spheres are positioned in the caustic or in the container as they should be mounted. That's with a big flank up.
No. But I give you a tip.
Matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I give you a tip.
Yeah.
I'll give you a tip. Put. There is a way you can dictate the thickness of coating in your course. The way it's done is you shape the caustic at the bottom of your pot. You use a dry pot. You use a dry container.
Yes.
And you shape and mount the caustic on it. If you want a heavier coating, let's say right in the center, you mount it like a little hill on the bottom. Okay. And you position your core right on top of it. You understand?
Yeah. Yes.
And then if you want more coating on the edge but not much in the middle or in the center of your core, the top ends, yeah, you do the reverse. You open like a ring.
Okay. Okay.
What this does, understand the process. What this does, when you add the boiling hot water, the heat in that environment straight above it will get affected more. You understand? So you create a thicker layer and you create a powder layer. When you finished your 2 or 3 time layer, do this and you will see that you create a velvety, dustish layer in your core. Mounted in the middle, which you create a very high temperature, but you have to make sure your coating is at least 1 or 2 days dry. Yeah. Because if it's not, you'll wipe it out.
Yeah.
Okay, but this then the advantage with this, let me explain the advantage with this is. The advantages with this is that you can create extreme ultraviolet and you can create a very fast opening of your plasma. Because it's like a sandpaper, the plasma will open in like nothing. You absorb the electrons in the gaps very rapidly. You reach the plasma state much more faster. And then you reach the position of the, what do you call it, opening of the plasma. Because you have a mesh that the plasma, you're already halfway in the plasma. It's a beautiful to do. The reactor which I use for the energy, the one we came from the Belgium, is coated that way.
That's what I did with the course, with the caustic and so forth. Yeah, I wanted to ask
If you
something.
quote it second, third time, fourth time, don't repeat the
Mhm.
same structure. Try what happens if you do once with a what I call with a mountain in the middle, the hill in the middle,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
put it on the top. You find the top end it creates a beautiful powderish, and then the third time or the fourth time, do it around the ring, because
Mhm.
you create different layers. And then when you want to create plasma is much easier to produce when you have a powder layer than a flat layer.
Yeah.
A quick job in and out doesn't work, but because you what do you call it? You have coated it
Mhm.
in a way by electro. Is it? How is it done? Electrolysis. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can do it beautifully. You can do it. Your core should become a powder before you close it. Don't rush to close it.
Yeah.
Repeat the process 3 or 4 times, and powder. Understand you can play with the caustic position of caustic in respect to your core. Creates different heat condition for release of the structure, but you got to make sure at least a day or two, not
Yeah.
out of the pot. When you take it out of the caustic, you allow it for a day or so to go. What do you call it? To go growth. You allow the layers to grow. Then you allow 1 or 2 days to dry. You just open the same container as you were growing it, just a little bit. Let it dry. When you've done that, then you go back into doing the caustic the way you want it. I said people didn't understand that time. To make a perfect core coating, you need about 2 months.
I did all those things, but what I also did was put the container outside in the sun.
Never done that. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's very moisty then in the container, and it seems to be going faster, blackening. I don't know if if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's
But
possible.
just testing. The only thing I didn't do is use a insulated how you say net
Doesn't matter.
chicken
You need
wire.
it. Yeah, you don't need to do it.
Oh, okay.
Actually, what you'll realize when you use the same chicken wire for a few times, it becomes a nano itself, nano coated because of the chemicals.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you can play very nicely with it. What you do, you use the mesh as another part of the plasma to connect into the GANs.
Okay.
A lot of people, when they put a meter on the nano layers and they see voltage, they don't realize you can keep points of the voltmeter on a nano material and one in the air. The plasma connection shows even more power. And it's very nice if you understand what you're doing with it.
We experimented in the weekend with the members of the group, the core, and we hadn't any result of it. But I thought about it to use also amount of plasmatic environment out of a container, nanolayering. And I tried this yesterday with no results also. I don't know if I done well with this.
We'll see.
I just trying to understand.
I'll show you a way you can. One of the tests you can do, or anybody can do. It'll be very interesting. Make 2 or 3 layers. And then in one part of the layer, if you're using just for example, not with your core, use the oil of orange. Rub in one corner and try to coat. Then you'll have a beautiful, you'll tell me what you've seen. You see the structure, a new structure. So very nice because the oil of orange or the oil of citron has a beautiful effect in creating large but very powerful small gravitational magnetic field. And then you try to coat back after you put the orange peel on it and see what results you get. Put it back in the caustic. If you've done it right, you will see something very fast.
You mean on the core or copper wires?
Just do it on a plate. Take a piece of copper plate and test on it. Then you might understand. You might be able to use it in your course for space technology. Alex, you got to see it. Don't use it on your core. Get a piece of copper, coat it a couple of times, then use on one part of it. Just get an orange and the oil of it, not the orange, so just the oil of the skin, and put in one corner, and then coat 2 or 3 times, and then tell me what you see.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're just about 5 minutes. We have to close. I'll give the back to John.
So to conclude, I think just a small aspect. We are just about ready to start the reactors. Some reactors have been put together, so we should be starting in the days coming. Everything is together. The gas, different gas are already. We have put together at least 2 gas for the moment, and the whole place is set to start.
John, we'll be able to look forward to some information on that in the next workshop, I'm sure.
Yes.
I got another question. What happened with this learning things on 15th?
Could you repeat, please, Ludmil?
What happened? We were gonna start on 15th, the university itself.
Trying to organize it. So it could be a few days late. It has to be sorted out from our security side.
Okay. So you understood that has to be
maximum 7 days delay, but it'll be sorted next week.
No, because I sent email and got no response from it. That's why I'm asking.
Where did we send it to?
The address which was on Gmail. It was posted by Marek, I think, on.
We gotta get hold of Marek.
Yes. He's been busy. Marek was very busy with the results about Fukushima, so that might be a delay.
Well, if you don't have it, I can resend it right away. That's not a problem.
Okay, well, we'll have to check anyway. So,
any other announcements or other particular things you'd like to tell us about before signing off?
Next week, next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Okay.
Next Thursday, we will release some information which I think is vital for the future of the foundation as a whole. Actually, I don't think I know it is vital for the future of the foundation, but we are still waiting for the documents to arrive to put it in that position, and we will explain exactly what it is and how we stand. We have received documentation and the news which puts the foundation on a very, very, what do you call it, peculiar position, and we have to see how we can resolve the matter or how we can put the matter out to go to the next step, because it's the Thursday before the Easter holidays, And last Thursday, I think we are 1 or 2 short. Some people are going on holidays for a week. The week after that, we have no sessions. It's a holiday. Everybody's away. If there is anybody, so I'll hold the workshop on my own, but most of the people are on holiday. We are closed that week of the 22nd of April. So, but still, if there is, I keep a workshop, or as one of my works on Singularity, or with very few people here. But next Thursday we'll let you know when we have everything in our hand, and I'll send a note to Rick, because I think it will be very important for the future of the foundation. It's one of the major steps for us at this moment. Anything else?
Mr. Kess, I just wanted to ask how the meeting last Thursday went with the Italian government people.
Silent. These things we do not discuss in public. We tell you what we are doing, but we can't discuss what's been agreed. There's a lot of political move to bring the foundation to close within the next 30 days. There is huge move to shut down all the accesses to the foundation, all the accounts, all the Gmails and everything else. This is what I said. Next Thursday we make an announcement. There's a huge move made by governments. So we keep out of it today, but in time we'll announce.
Okay,
I think next Thursday will be very important for people who want to know what's happening with the foundation. Next question will be next time.
Yeah, I think that's going to be over our deadline here.
Mr. Cash? The train has already started.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Mr. Cash?
James, that's James, right?
This is James. Did you get my email concerning the files?
Yes, but I didn't understand. Did you receive my file?
No, I couldn't download it.
Okay, but I'll do it today. Tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice. Bye, everybody. Today from all of us here.
Yep. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cash, and everybody from the Spaceship Institute.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, and that ends the 6th Knowledge Seekers Workshop with the Knowledge Seekers of the Spaceship Institute. Thanks, everybody, for attending. See you next week.
Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.